read 5 contracts today. I do total and 8 percussion and keep the place together. Well, it's not even now. It's under, the other option.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Fred Fox School of Music. We ask that you take a moment to turn off any electronic devices so as not to distract from this evening's performance. Please note, due to copyright restrictions, audio and video recording are not permitted. Thank you, and enjoy the performance.
Good evening, welcome. I see that the percussion studio all set in the back. My name's Corey Denham, and I will be presenting my lecture recital, The Well-Prepared Marimba, an exploration of extended techniques and instrument preparations in marimba repertoire. Within the marimba repertoire exists a distinct category that calls for extended techniques and preparations. Composers and performers use instrument preparations and extended techniques to enhance existing features of the marimba or eliminate limitations of standard performance techniques. Percussionist and composer Gina Ryan summarizes these goals by asking, are we aiming to complement or disrupt what is already there? My thesis is, marimba extended techniques and preparations have been underutilized. The continued advancement of marimba repertoire requires full use of the instrument's capabilities. This project aims to detail these capabilities so composers and performers have a resource to access the instrument's full expressive potential. I'll be defining extended techniques as unconventional techniques used to modify the instrument's intended capabilities. Prepared marimba will be defined as the use of foreign objects incorporated into the instrument's construction to modify its sonic capabilities. I'll be describing both extended techniques and preparations using three categories: pitch manipulation, timbral modification, and decay modification. Understanding the development of the marimba in the 20th century, it's helpful for identifying repertoire that uses extended techniques and preparations. The marimba was introduced to the United States through folk marimba traditions of southern Mexico and Central America at the beginning of the 20th century. The word marimba comes from the African Bantu language and is widely used to describe tuned wooden bars suspended over resonators. In the late 19th and early 20th century, marimba traditions were prominent in Mexico's southernmost state, Chiapas, and the neighboring country, Guatemala. Two common types of marimbas found in this region are the marimba sencilla, which translates to simple marimba and is a diatonic single-road instrument, and the marimba double, which is a chromatic instrument with 2 rows of keys configured just like the piano. The bars of the marimba double, called teclas, are suspended over resonating chambers called cajones. The cajones amplify the tecla's fundamental pitch. The bottom of the cajones close into a pyramid shape with wax fastened over a small aperture. Stretched over the aperture is a thin layer of pick intestine that produces a buzzing effect via sympathetic vibration when the bars are struck. This buzzing effect, called jarleo, is viewed as an integral part of the marimba's tonal quality. The popularity of the xylophone also contributed to the marimba gaining its own voice and repertoire. In the early 20th century, the distinction between the marimba and xylophone was often unclear. In 1910, the J.C. Deegan Company manufactured the marimba xylophone. This instrument had a range of up to 6 octaves, and its high register had xylophone characteristics, while its low register had marimba characteristics. Claire Omar Musser would become the dominant figure in marimba development in the United States. Musser was prolific as a soloist, composer, arranger, conductor, and pedagogue. He was also responsible for manufacturing innovations that led to standardization and mass production of marimbas. Musser and his students, such as virtuoso Vida Chenoweth, were responsible for commissioning a growing body of solo repertoire. Chenoweth began to commission a repertoire that had equal value to that of other instruments with established canon. One of these early commissioning pursuits comes from Darius Milhaud. His concerto for marimba and vibraphone is the second concerto ever composed for the marimba. It's from 1947, and this work is the earliest example of a composer taking interest in the marimba's modified timbral possibilities. Milhaud indicates a section to be played with the butt end of the mallets and 5 measures using only the hands. In the second half of the 20th century, Japanese marimba artist Keiko Abe successfully developed a body of idiosyncratic repertoire for unaccompanied solo marimba. Abe's early commissions from 1962 through 1973 represent shifts in the compositional approaches to marimba, which had previously relied on idiomatic conventions of the xylophone. The works commissioned by Abe established many idiomatic conventions that continue to be used by marimba performers and composers. Now that we've discussed a brief history of the marimba, the concert marimba, and its repertoire, we'll move into discussing extended techniques and preparations in the 20th century. Like the marimba itself, instrument preparations and extended techniques developed throughout the 20th century. This project has examined instrument preparations and extended techniques found in various solo and chamber repertoire, not just percussion, to establish connections between compositional trends of the 20th century with trends in marimba repertoire. Notable pioneer of extended techniques, Henry Cow, developed extended techniques for the grand piano. Cow referred to his techniques as string piano, as the strings of the piano are used in several ways, including strumming, plucking, scraping, and producing harmonics by lightly pressing the nodal points of the strings. These techniques are found in Cow's piano works from 1923 through 1925, including the banshee, Aeolian harp, and sinister resonance. Influenced by Cow, John Cage coined the term prepared piano, referring to the process by which various objects are placed in prescribed areas of the piano. Cage's first composition to use such preparations is Bacchanal from 1938. In his essay, How the Piano Came to Be Prepared, Cage states that his use of prepared piano was originally a result of limitation. Cage was commissioned to compose for an upcoming dance performance and originally intended to compose for percussion ensemble, a medium which he had previously established himself. Due to space limitations in the theater, Cage devised piano preparations to simulate the timbral qualities of a percussion ensemble. Cage described the transformation of the piano into a percussion orchestra of an original sound and the decibel range of a harpsichord directly under the control of a pianist's fingertips. Cage would go on to insert preparations such as bolts and screws between piano strings so that with a single preparation, two different sounds could be produced. Many of Cage's works for prepared piano include a table of preparations that detail the required materials and their physical placement inside the piano. The specificity of these tables was necessary to allow specific timbres to be heard each time a work was performed. Cage wrote, "When I first placed objects between piano strings, it was with the desire to possess sounds, to be able to repeat them." Cage admitted to being dissatisfied when preparations were not set up with appropriate detail. After an errant performance of his work, The Perilous Night, he commented, "The preparations of the piano was so poor that I wish at the time I had never written the music." Cage's compositions illustrate the elevated importance of timbre in 20th century composition aesthetics. Attention to timbre remains a creative impetus for extended technique and preparation explorations. Since we've discussed both the history of the marimba and a brief overview of extended techniques and prepared piano, we'll be moving into this topic with the marimba. As I stated earlier, I have categorized extended techniques into three primary categories: pitch manipulation, timbral modification, and decay modification. Marimba extended techniques are achieved through various means, including using atypical beaters, playing parts of the marimba other than the keys, and producing acoustic phenomena such as harmonics and pitch bends. I will describe each category, providing some examples from repertoire. Marimba bars can produce upward and downward pitch bends. These techniques were first discovered by percussionist Emil Richards while collaborating with Harry Partch. Downward pitch bending is achieved by pressing a hard plastic or nylon mallet into the bar, sliding the mallet from the node to the center while the bar is activated with another mallet or bow. The pitch bending mallet can be covered with a thin layer of adhesive moleskin to protect the wooden keys. With this method, the pitch can be bent down nearly a semitone. Upward pitch bending is achieved by using a Super Ball mallet instead of a hard plastic or nylon mallet. Super Ball mallets are made by attaching a bouncy ball to a flexible mallet shaft made of fiberglass or a thin piece of flexible metal such as a nail file or oil dipstick. To perform the upward pitch bend on marimba, the performer places the Super Ball mallet in the center of the bar while activating the bar with a mallet or bow. The upward pitch bend can only be reliably achieved in the instrument's middle range, approximately E3 to E5. Pressing the Super Ball into the lower register bars produces a downwards bend, and the higher register bars are too thick to be noticeably affected by the addition of the Super Ball. I'm going to now demonstrate these two techniques. So I'll first start with the downward pitch bend, and then I'll demonstrate the upward pitch bend. So hopefully you can hear that the pitch bends down as I press this mallet into the bar and then returns to its starting pitch when I remove this mallet. This is my Super Ball mallet for the upward pitch bending. I'll play a few unaltered notes and then lightly press the Super Ball mallet into the center of the bar and you'll hear the pitch rise. Marimba bars produce a fundamental frequency and a series of simultaneously sounding harmonics. The presence of these harmonics contributes to the instrument's characteristic timbre. The marimba is tuned so that the first harmonic has a frequency that is 4 times that of the fundamental tone, which is 2 octaves higher, and the next harmonic has one that is 10 times the frequency, a major third plus 3 octaves higher. Marimba bars can be manipulated so that the balance of the fundamental and harmonics is altered, producing an increased audible presence of the harmonics. The first harmonic, 2 octaves above the fundamental, can be heard by placing a finger or mallet in the center of the bar while activating the bar with a mallet or bow. This technique can only be reliably achieved on the bars between C2 and C3 as the bars become too thick in the higher registers to respond to the fingers dividing the bar. This harmonic is most clear when activated with a bow, as only the harmonic frequency sounds. When activated with a mallet, both the fundamental and harmonic sound. The harmonic produces a softer sound, as marimba resonators are designed to only amplify the fundamental pitch of the bar. In Tonia Ko's Blue Skin of the Sea, which you'll hear a little later on, she calls for striking the bar between the node and the center so that the overtones of the marimba's lowest notes eclipse the fundamental. This beating spot produces a prominent 5th partial of the overtone series, which sounds a major third 3 octaves above the fundamental. With this technique, both the fundamental and 5th partial are present. I'll now demonstrate these 2 harmonic techniques. So I'll start with achieving the first harmonic, which will sound 2 octaves higher than the fundamental, and then the next harmonic, which is a major third plus 3 octaves higher. So at first you'll hear the fundamental pitch, and then as I rest my finger in the center of the bar, you'll hear the pitch, the harmonic, which is the same pitch 2 octaves higher. If you're noticing that that's a soft sound, it's because the resonator under the instrument is not designed to amplify that harmonic. The resonator only amplifies the fundamental tone. To produce the next harmonic, I play off-center. It produces a brighter timbre. It's a little difficult to discern just by itself, but if we contrast it with the fundamental back to back, I think you can hear the difference. Admittedly more subtle, but the harmonic is more present with that beating spot. The marimbas can modify the marimba's timbre through extended techniques in 2 primary ways: by using atypical mallets or by playing parts of the instrument other than the keys. Marimba repertoire is typically performed with yarn or rubber mallets of varying degrees of density or hardness. These mallets, through various design features, can produce subtle differences in timbre and articulation. The majority of works for solo marimba use either kind of mallet with 2 or 4 mallet techniques, resulting in a rather codified concept of sound production. Several types of atypical mallets can be used to radically alter the marimba's timbre. Many of these mallets are not mass-produced and require customization on behalf of the performer. These mallets often involve idiosyncratic techniques that require the performer to engage with unique methods of sound production. Percussionist Peyton McDonald is a prolific explorer of the marimba's sonic capabilities via atypical mallets. McDonald has produced numerous improvisations and compositions using custom-made mallets. McDonald's custom-made mallets include the self-named Stochastistics and Womp Thrunkle. It's okay to giggle. Stochastistics are a typical yarn mallet with freely dangling ping pong balls loosely attached near the mallet head. The ping pong balls randomly bounce as the player strikes the instrument. McDonald's Womp Thrunkle is a large slap mallet whose mallet head extends out horizontally, allowing the marimbas to simultaneously strike clusters of adjacent bars. In his article, The Scourge of Yarn Mallets, MacDonald advocates for more use of atypical beaters and hypothesizes an explanation as to why atypical beaters are so infrequently used, stating, "The problem with developing percussionists is that after being subjected to a barrage of yarn mallet advertisements and sponsored artists, most young students conclude that indeed yarn mallets are the only way to go. And then the tail is wagging the proverbial dog. Instead of artists dictating the direction and shape of the musical landscape, it is the companies. The situation then becomes even more circular, spiraling down into a vortex of materialism and convenience. The companies influence the players on their mallet selection. The players then commission pieces for that sound world. The composers write the pieces, and then the mallet companies respond accordingly. The circle is complete." Some examples of works calling for atypical mallets in the repertoire include Julie Spencer's Elam, Pierre Norgard's Waves, and John Bergamo's 5 short pieces for marimba. Spencer's Elam premiered at PASIC in 1994 and was commissioned by Emil Richards to showcase signature rattle and slap mallets that were manufactured by the Vic Firth Company. In his 1972 percussion solo, multiple percussion solo, Waves, Pierre Norgard requires the marimbas to rest a xylophone mallet, typically not used on the marimba, in the space between 2 adjacent bars while playing with the yarn mallet, allowing the xylophone mallet to bounce freely and create a ricochet effect. In the third etude of Bergamo's 5 short pieces, the composer calls for Super Bowl mallets to perform press strokes. With this technique, both the bar's fundamental and harmonics are present alongside slight pitch bends and percussive attacks of the rubber balls. The resulting sound is a unique, subdued hum. I'll demonstrate a short passage of this Bergamo work using the Super Balls. Several unique sounds can be produced by playing various parts of the marimba's construction. These techniques involve striking or scraping the resonators or end pieces found at the end of each instrument. Mark Ford's marimba trio, Stubernick, contains an extended solo section supported by 2 accompaniment parts playing the frame, end piece, and resonators. Ford calls for one player to kneel in front of the upper register to play on 2 adjacent resonators. The other player kneels at the low register to play on the frame end piece. Ford calls for this performer to elicit 5 distinct sounds from the frame: low, medium, high, mallet shaft on the upper edge, and mallet shaft on the bottom edge, as seen in this diagram. Gina Ryan's Never Never Island calls for resonator glissandi with whisk, like you would find in your kitchen. Ryan calls for the performer to use both manuals of resonators, each producing a distinct glissando. I'm going to invite my good friend Jeffrey Koyamtawa up to the stage, and we're going to demonstrate some of these techniques. of resonators. Marimba bars produce a fixed resonance. The bars of the low register, C2 through C3, have the longest resonance, while higher registers have less resonance. And the extended techniques can be used to lengthen or shorten the instrument's natural decay. Bowing bars with a bass or cello bow can lengthen a marimba bar's natural sustain. Bow strokes create uninterrupted sustained notes determined by the speed of the stroke and the length of the bow used. In the fourth etude of Bergamo's 5 short pieces, the marimbist performs an active bass line with 2 yarn mallets in the left hand and a lyrical melody with a bow in the right hand. Bergamo uses a variety of note lengths in the melody, demonstrating the bass bow's ability to produce varied durations. I'll play a short excerpt from this etude to demonstrate the variety of note lengths we can achieve with the bow. Percussionist Stephen Solik has developed techniques for lengthening and amplifying the natural sustain of keyboard percussion bars through the use of external resonators. Using external resonators involves identifying closed objects such as cups, bottles, or bowls, or in my case, a paint can, whose dimensions allow the object to act as a resonator when held over specified bars. An object with the correct dimensions will affect the marimba bar's resonance similarly to the resonators under the instrument. I'll demonstrate this technique. So I found an object that acts as a resonator for the pitch E4. I'll play the pitch normally, and then you'll see me pass the can over that pitch. When the can passes over the pitch, you'll notice that it becomes more amplified and more resonant. The resonance of marimba bars can also be dampened via extended techniques. Dead strokes and body dampening both shorten marimba bars' natural decay. Dead strokes are achieved by striking the marimba with a mallet and leaving it in place, not allowing the bar to ring. Body dampening is achieved by leaning the hip into the marimba bars to prevent ringing. Techniques from these categories can be used in combination. For example, when performing a bowed harmonic that I demonstrated earlier, an additional performer can hold an external resonator, which I just demonstrated, over the bowed bar to resonate that harmonic frequency. This amplifies the resulting harmonic, which would normally be unaffected by the resonators under the instrument. I'm going to invite Jeffrey back out to demonstrate this. So you'll hear me play the bowed harmonic while Jeffrey amplifies with the external resonator. The development of marimba extended techniques is ongoing. I have outlined some of the possibilities with the hope that future composers and marimbas will continue to develop the marimba's sonic palette. We're now going to move on to discussing prepared marimba. Prepared marimba involves incorporating objects into the instrument's construction to modify its characteristic sound. I have categorized preparations using the same categories as extended techniques that we've already discussed: pitch manipulation, timbral modification, and decay modification. Prepared marimba works often involve preparations from multiple categories. Individual preparations from various works are going to be discussed, and I'll demonstrate some of the possibilities in each category. In his guide to percussion composition, Samuel Solomon states, the pitch of individual notes can be lowered up to a quarter tone by attaching putty or clay to the bar. This will also dampen the bar, darken the color, and shorten the sustain. The clay adds mass to the bar, which results in a lower pitch. I'm going to quickly demonstrate this preparation. I'll play just a few chromatic pitches on an unaltered marimba, and then the same chromatic pitches on a marimba in which I've lowered some of the notes a quarter tone, and I believe you'll hear the difference. So the unaltered. And with some quarter tone adjustments. In Francois Saran's I Don't Belong to Your World, the composer calls for preparing the marimba with pitched omglocken and crotales placed above the edge of the bar so that when the bar is struck, it activates the respective omglocken or crotale. The omglocken and crotale should be prepared with a thin layer of moleskin to protect the bar. With this preparation, both the pitch of the marimba bar and added instrument are heard. Saran calls for the omglocken and crotale pitches to match the pitch of the bar they are placed above. This choice creates a new color as the timbre and overtones of each instrument combine. This type of preparation could also use pitches that are different from the marimba bar, creating harmony when struck. I'm now going to demonstrate this preparation. The marimba's characteristic timbre can be modified through preparations. One method involves attaching materials to the bars that vibrate when struck. These types of preparations have immense variety and often involve experimentation on behalf of the composer and marimbist. These preparations often contribute an element of unpredictable white noise to the marimba's natural tone. A variety of materials have been used, including aluminum foil, wax paper, wooden dowels, plastic beads, tin pans, coins, paper clips, bundles of straw, stalks of bamboo, small cymbals, various wooden and metal rattles, plastic and paper cups, ping pong balls, plastic mallets resting between the keys, and wooden sticks resting between the upper and lower manual. Examples from repertoire include Gina Ryan's Porgy paper, where she calls for layers of wax paper to be placed atop the bars and played with bundle sticks, as you can see pictured here. And Ryan's Thin Metal Dance, which calls for preparing the notes C2 through A4 with a large sheet of aluminum foil directly atop the bars and playing with the hands. Stacey Bowers, studies number 3 and 5 for prepared marimba, use preparations of multiple material types, including bound straw and small metal objects such as paper clips or coins attached to specified bars. Returning to Francois Saran, he makes use of a plastic cup placed upside down on a single bar with a ping pong ball placed inside. The ball freely bounces when the bar is struck. This preparation adds an element of unpredictability to the instrument, as the player does not have direct control over the bouncing ball. I'm going to demonstrate this preparation. Preparations of this type can produce an expansive timbral palette. Since this type of preparation involves resting objects directly on the bars, the following steps can be followed to protect the instruments from damage. When possible, rehearse prepared works without preparations. Use painter's tape or sticky tack to attach objects to the bars so that objects do not come into direct contact with the wood. Both the painter's tape and sticky tack don't leave any type of adhesive residue, so it won't damage the rosewood bar. Remove preparations after use, checking for signs of damage, using common sense. And lastly, wipe the bars with a dry, emphasis on dry, microfiber cloth after preparations have been removed. There are also means of modifying the marimba's timbre without preparing the bars. One approach involves modifying the instrument's resonators. Sheets of wax paper or aluminum foil can be placed atop the resonators between the resonator opening and the underside of the bar. Stacey Bowers calls for wax paper to cover individual resonators in his studies numbers 3 and 5. These preparations create a buzzing effect as the material vibrates against the activated resonator. I think this kind of harkens the sound of the buzzing sound of the Guatemalan marimba. I'll demonstrate each of these preparations. First, the wax paper, and then the aluminum foil. Preparations are also found in the repertoire that involve embedding percussive elements within the marimba's keyboard. Oh, I skipped ahead a little bit, excuse me. Preparations are also found in the repertoire that involve embedding percussive elements into the marimba's keyboard. These types of preparations expand the instrument's timbral palette without directly affecting the bars or resonators. In Gina Ryan's Ridges, which you'll hear in just a little while, she embeds a güiro, a tin can, and small and large corrugated tubing into the marimba's playing area. Because each object has a ridged surface, both the pitched marimba bars played with hair combs and unpitched percussion instruments take on a similar character. It can be challenged that these objects are not preparations since they are simply added to the marimba's playing area and do not alter the marimba sound itself. In speaking with Ryan and others, we've recognized there is a distinction between prepared marimba and marimba with multiple percussion. In this instance, the ridged surfaces should seamlessly blend with the marimba tone, in effect creating a new instrument, as has been the goal with prepared instruments since Cage. There are several possibilities for dampening the marimba's natural decay. Dampening objects can be used on bars and resonators. Bowers studies number 3 and 5 make use of 2 dampening preparations. The first is a cork ball placed in specified resonator openings that contacts the underside of the bar, as seen here. The second is a rubber object placed firmly between 2 bars. I have found that rubber conga feet sold by the company Latin Percussion work especially well as the rubber object, as you can see here. There are fewer options for extending the marimba's natural decay with preparations. Some previously discussed preparations can produce longer durations, but also affect other elements such as pitch or timbre. For example, Sauron's Omglocken preparation that you heard a few moments ago does produce an extended duration as the sound of the Omglocken rings after contacting the bar. In this case, the Omglocken produces the extended duration, not the marimba bar itself. Using aluminum foil atop the bars or resonators can also produce extended decay, as the vibration of the foil often extends past the bar's audible decay. In this case, longer durations are possible, but with a significantly affected timbre. One method for extending a bar's natural decay, while mostly maintaining its timbre, is using a vibrating device, such as an electric toothbrush attached to the bar. With this preparation, the electric toothbrush should be wrapped in a thin layer of adhesive moleskin and attached with painter's tape. When activated, the electric toothbrush vibrates against the bar, creating a soft sustain. I'd like to try to find a device that has as soft a motor as possible so that we can maximize the pitch. All right. Preparations from multiple categories are most often used within a single work. There remain vast possibilities for combinations of preparations. The preparations discussed in this lecture are just meant to spur creative thinking about the instrument's capabilities so that the instrument's natural limitations can be eliminated or enhanced to serve expressive purposes. Most of the preparations described can also be used in conjunction with previously discussed extended techniques, further advancing the myriad of creative possibilities available to performers and composers. After a brief intermission, I will perform a selection of works that demonstrate some of the extended techniques and preparations I have discussed today. I will begin with movements 3 and 5 from Tonia Ko's Blue Skin of the Sea. This work draws its name for the composer's experience flying into her home state of Hawaii and observing the smooth and flat, tranquil surface of the sea from her plane window. In this work, Ko explores the horizontal surface of the marimba rather than the vertical. The remainder of the program includes Lukas Ligeti's Scherzo, Gina Ryan's Ridges and Sketches for Eyes, and Keiko Abe's Voice of Matsuri drums. As you listen to these selected works, please take note of what extended techniques and preparations you hear. Consider how extended techniques and preparations are employed by these composers to create idiosyncratic sound worlds that expand the marimba's expressiveness. Following the performance, there will be time for questions. Thank you. And as I mentioned, we're just going to take a very short 5-minute intermission just to do a few set changes, and then we'll be back with the performance. Thanks. We are going to have time for questions, but before we do, I just want to make a couple closing remarks and thank yous. I would like to sincerely thank the members of my advisory committee, Dr. Palter, Dr. Rosenblatt, and Dr. Trout, whose guidance and support throughout my time here has been immeasurable. Especially their steadfast support of this research, especially Dr. Palter for letting me do all this to the marimbas and having the resources that I can take up a whole marimba in the basement. It's been really appreciated. Thank you to the members of the University of Arizona Percussion Studio, past and present, for being great, inspiring, and high-achieving colleagues. And thank you to my family, especially my wife, Anna Shaker, whose continued support of my education and artistic undertakings just is beyond description. So thank you. I will open up the floor to you all now, who chose to sit in the back. I'll try my best to hear you. If anyone has any questions, and also if you're watching or listening to the YouTube stream, if you have a question, you could type it into the comments, and one of the crew is monitoring that and can read it here in the hall live. But I'll turn it over to you all now if anyone has any questions for me. Yes, Nathan.
So with all these extended techniques, the goal is to modify the sound of the instrument, but you haven't included electronics. Do electronics fall under your definition of extended techniques, or is that like wire?
Yeah, great question. And to me, that's just a different category and a whole nother can of worms. I think it's exciting, and I have a lot of interest with that, and I've played a lot of works with both fixed media and live electronics using, like Max MSP, for example, and I'm very interested in that kind of work. I think a combination of these things is definitely possible and exists within the repertoire. For the purposes of my research, I really wanted to narrow the focus on just extended techniques, physical techniques that the performer achieves, and preparations. There's great work happening with electronics, but I think it's a bigger conversation, and I wanted my research to be more focused. Michael.
So there's some certain mallet companies, such as Malletech, for instance, that feature resonators that are tunable by nature. Do you believe that these innovations in percussion could lead to extended harmonic techniques, as you mentioned before, not being able to hear certain harmonic style instruments, and do you think that's attainable by one person in the future?
Yeah, if I understand your question correctly, just how the tunable resonators can affect like pitch manipulation, I think it definitely can. I think I've experimented with our marimba that has the tunable resonators, and a combination of the putty that I was using tonight plus those tunable resonators can definitely allow you to change the pitch of the bar quite a bit. So there are some works that specifically call for quarter tone marimba, where the designations for the pitch, the exact frequency of bars, is quite specific. So I think using those tunable resonators would make it a lot easier to set the marimba up with those specific frequencies. Anyone? Yoshi.
So it's been a while since I've seen you perform with the same instrument side, fixed marimba, and the white tube is a new thing since the last time I watched you perform. How much of a fixed marimba or like a piece like this is up to your interpretation, and how much is like composed by the composer?
Yeah, I think in the program tonight, all of the composers were quite specific with what they wanted and where things go. Although, as a percussionist, that there is an ambiguity always inherent in percussion. Like if someone tells me to hit a cymbal with a drumstick, it's like, well, which cymbal and which drumstick? It's like we all know that there's actually that simple designation actually has quite an endless variety, and that's where the artistry of the percussionist comes in, and choosing the cymbal and choosing the drumstick. So even though the composers were quite specific in all of these works, of course I still had to make a lot of autonomous decisions about what corrugated tubing I could find at Home Depot, and all of these things still had to be decisions that I made at the end of the day. Dr. Palter.
Really great program, really great lecture recital, first and foremost, and congratulations on that. Mine's sort of a two-part question. I suppose I should know maybe the answer to one or either of these questions, but the first part being, what was your introduction and interest in getting involved in this topic? Because it wasn't really anything that was on your radar, to my recollection, when you arrived here 3 years ago. And I guess the second part would be, where your interests lie in terms of moving forward with this. Like, do you know, having worked on all these pieces now, and really knowing them better than just about anyone probably on the planet right now, you know, what things interest you the most, and what things do you think you want to, you know, pursue? Is there any specific, whether it's the extended techniques, or the prepared, or certain types of preparations, or certain things that as you're working on this go, this is interesting, but it's not really what I'm doing right now? Does anything like that happen?
Yeah, I would say in terms of how I got into it, it happened slowly. There are a couple pieces that I was familiar with, I had Tonia Ko's Blue Skin of the Sea, for example. I was familiar with that piece, but then was programmed to play it at the summer festival that I was at in Switzerland. And so I was able to learn that piece, and I performed it with the composer and had quite a few conversations with the composer. And so I think that was an early, when I was starting to catch the bug, kind of early on. And then also at the same summer festival, I was talking with lots of composers who were writing for the marimba, and they were asking me lots of questions about what it could do. And I noticed that there wasn't a comprehensive resource detailing the extended techniques and preparations for marimba. There are some percussionists that have compiled this work for vibraphone, and most other instruments like clarinet, flute, saxophone have really detailed manuals about their extended technique possibilities, and I noticed that the marimba didn't have anything like that completely compiled. So I would say that's kind of how I started my interest with the topic. And then in terms of what I want to do next, I've been holding off doing my own creative work. I am a composer, and for the purposes of this research, I haven't interjected my own creative work into the process, but because I've been dealing with this so much, I'm really eager to start composing works that use some of the techniques and a couple other things that I might keep a little under wraps for the time being. But yeah, that's where I would like to go with this next, is start employing it in my own creative work as a composer.
Have you thought of doing any, I mean, I know you're a composer, you're a great composer, I've heard many of your pieces since you've been here. Have you thought to commission people? And if you were to commission people, what sort of parameters do you think you would, you know, implement if you were to go on this road with extended techniques?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, if I were to commission a new marimba solo, you know, I commissioned a new work on my last solo recital before this project ever took place, but if I were to commission a new marimba solo, I would definitely point the composer towards this document and allow them to kind of just have free reign with how they choose to use it. I mean, I think it's important to point out, just because a piece uses an extended technique or preparation doesn't mean that it's a good piece of music. So I would hope that the composer has musical ideas, and that whatever techniques or preparations get used kind of serve the musical idea and are not just gimmicks or something like that. But yeah, certainly I would definitely share it with composers I work with in the future. Zach.
Do the pitch bending techniques that you use, I mean, just looking at these marimbas and what I remember them sounding like to me playing them years ago, have you tried these on like those techniques on cheaper, or I should say lesser quality marimba bars themselves? And do they work?
Like different materials besides rosewood, you mean?
Yeah, well, no, like, I guess, well, yeah, different materials besides rosewoods, i.e. like Adams bars that are meant for, you know, marching band.
Sure. To be honest, I haven't, but it's something that's been on, mostly just because almost every instrument we have is a rosewood bar, so I don't think we have a single instrument here that isn't rosewood. And so I haven't really tried it on other bars of other material types. The physics will hold up, it should work, But I'm definitely interested in that because it kind of addresses the instrument maintenance question too, if there's other material types, because rosewood is scarce and we do need to take care of it, and I fully recognize that. So I'm interested in pursuing some other bar types with this kind of work for sure. Yes, Yoshi.
This might be just my a little bit of ignorance, but would you think that there's like a limit or maybe restrictions for prepared pieces? Like, would it just be limited to solos? Because I'm thinking of like last semester we performed deciduous by Vietnam. So there's like incorporation of sound effects with like a clipped snare and a crotale on it. But if that's in an ensemble setting that will project, is there limitations aside from projection? Like, do you see like fixed pieces for marimba with an ensemble?
Yeah, I haven't come across very many like chamber music works that feature prepared marimba, but I think it's definitely possible. And I think I hope that this work not only aids to the solo repertoire, but chamber repertoire as well. I do think in like a large ensemble context, in like an orchestra or a wind band, that just admittedly some of this stuff is just not going to sonically contribute in those spaces, and I think that's okay. But I definitely think in the chamber music realm, there's a lot of possibility for this work to be included. All right, Nathan.
Do you have a favorite extended technique?
Favorite extended technique?
It's a 30-second.
Yeah. I'm pretty partial to the extended resonators, and I think there's a lot more work to do. I have to credit all of that to this percussionist, Stephen Solik, who really developed that technique for vibraphone and took some time to speak with me about it. I think it's rather cutting edge, and there's still a lot of room to be done. I think we're just starting to kind of mess with what we can do with the extended resonators and how that can work. And I was talking with Stephen about the possibility of like 3D printing so that we can make sure we have a set for specific bars. And that technique hasn't been employed in a work really significantly, and I'm excited by the prospect of that being in a significant work. I think Dr. Palter had a question?
Yeah, I'm sort of trying to rethink it, but this is perhaps more philosophical, but at what point, everything's like like the prepared pieces, but at any point they can become their own instruments. You know what I mean? Like when we think about multiple percussion setups, like this is the setup to Zikus, we don't really think about it like, well, there's a marimba there, and there's the ombach, and there's the tones. It's like, or XY, or whatever these things are. But at what point is it no longer like a marimba with stuff on it versus like it's now this new instrument?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure exactly how I feel about that, but I will say that going all the way back to Henry Cow with the string piano, he thought of his string piano and the way that he used it as a different instrument. And I have research kind of documenting how he commented on the string piano being a different instrument. So I suppose that's one take is that when you're really radically transforming something, it really does become a different instrument. To me, I still feel like a marimba player at all times, and I felt like a marimba player with every piece tonight. And so to me, it's just a wide spectrum of what the marimba can do, and with all these things that I did tonight, there's still marimba pieces, and I'm still a marimba player. So I think that's how I would feel about it.
Yeah, I mean, I totally respect that. To my mind, the piece on the end there is much more like a multiple percussion piece, and you're playing with cones. I mean, there was part of it with mallets, but like once you start breaking up cones and rubbing, scraping, and not really playing a marimba in a traditional sense, I guess that's what I'm starting to think about. Like I think of a piece like Fragments 2, which was a snare drum solo, and he never played the snare drum in any sort of way that anyone would think this is really a snare drum solo. So to my mind, it's really not as much a marimba solo as like a Keiko Abe, which is very much a marimba solo with paddle mallets.
Right.
If that makes sense. So I guess I'm just starting to see like if that piece became even further outside with all kinds of stuff on it, and would I still consider it a marimba solo? Because the heart of that thing really wasn't as much of a marimba in many ways. It was like a few bars of marimba,
Mm-hmm.
and then all that other stuff.
Sure, yeah, and talking with some other percussionists who are doing this kind of work, because I'm certainly not the only one, I think the way to perhaps to think about it is kind of like a spectrum and not just on or off, is or isn't. And so that these things do kind of exist on a spectrum, and yes, maybe on one end of this spectrum we do get past solo marimba and it becomes multiple percussion, but there's a whole spectrum along the way. So it's more gray as opposed to this is or this isn't, but works can kind of exist on a spectrum between solo marimba and multiple percussion.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any closing questions? All right, thank you all. I'll be around.